I wanted to ask if you think the candidates are paying enough attention to this issue. I mean, there's no one out there, with the possible exception, about this much. Why is that, in your view?
I think there's a political calculation there for people. I mean, they're politicians, and I think there are very, very winning issues on the conservative side, and maybe they think they don't need to touch on the pro-life issue. However, I would urge them to do so, because I have the pulse of at least the pro-life people, and they are looking to see what they say. And one of the changes that we saw from this amendment, from the last amendment in 2008, is that we have had at least tacit endorsement from every major GOP candidate out there. Every candidate that calls themselves pro-life is saying personhood is the way to go. And to me, that's a great inroads. They're willing to stand up. Is willing to stand up for a child conceived in rape. That takes guts, and I really appreciate that.
In your assessment of this lack of high profile on this issue with Colorado politicians?
I think it's a different electorate. I certainly think it's a different slate than we had in 2008. And the No on 62 campaign is really urging voters to become informed. We would like all voters to go to our website, 62voteno.org, and become informed about the facts of what Amendment 62 actually will do. Mr. Jones has talked about how this will not be hurting women and their families. And in fact, the physicians and the medical researchers and even the Colorado Bar Association, who currently is supporting the No on 62 campaign, is saying that this will have huge impact on all of our statutes in the state of Colorado. Right now we have over 20,000 statutes and municipal ordinances and regulations that mention the term person. And by changing the fundamental change that the proponents are looking for, which is giving constitutional and legal rights, in fact, you are disrupting all jurisprudence in the state of Colorado. So you are inviting politicians, courts, and lawyers into personal private decisions. You are disrupting the sanctity of the physician-patient relationship, and you are not allowing women to be able to get access to health care. Mr. Jones has also talked about issues with regard to abortion and really wanting to make sure that abortion is not legal anymore in the state of Colorado. There are many reasons why a woman may choose to have an abortion. It may be because she has been raped, or she's been incested, or her life is in danger. And because of that, the No on 62 campaign believes that women and their families need to continue to have access to these types of services so that they can be taken care of. And we're not hurting Coloradoans, we're not hurting women, and we're not hurting Colorado families.
Let me explore a little further the difficult issue of rape. Mm-hmm. Obviously, my interpretation of this issue here is it's a battle of rights, or a definition of which rights take supremacy. Mm-hmm. Am I right, Gualberto, that you in your mind and this initiative are clear that a pregnancy caused by rape, that there's an obligation to carry that pregnancy to term?
There's an obligation to not harm the child.
What's the difference between that and what I just said?
You mentioned, you said a pregnancy. A pregnancy focuses just on the mother, and so what we're trying to do is to point out to people that there's another human being there. A rape is a horrendous thing. It's unfair to the woman to have to carry that child. I will admit that to the viewers. However, how is the dismembered body of a child, how is that a vindication of that woman's right? How is that fixing anything that happened to that woman? That's a second violation. There's a lady who's helping us, who is the product of a rape. She was conceived in rape. If she were sitting in this seat today, and someone were to say to her, well, being pro-life is okay, but in cases of rape, you're just really out there. Well, she's that person. They're individuals. They're people. And so it's not just the pregnancy. The pregnancy is a horrible thing that the woman has been, she has been violated, and there is a culprit, and that's the man that did it. It's not the child. So we should focus on punishing the man. And I would point out, there's a website from a young lady who goes into abortion clinics. Her name is Lila Rose. It's liveaction.org. And she goes in and pretends to be a 13-year-old who is getting molested and has become impregnated by a 30-year-old. Statutory rape, if there is any. Case after case, the abortion industry will help her to get the abortion and enable her to go back and keep being abused. And so it's really a farce what they're putting out there. The impression that they're providing the service which is going to heal a woman, which it is not, because a woman knows that she has a child inside. And secondly, the fact that there is just an absolute disregard for the law in how they report cases of rape. Why? Because they make money off of it. Every time a woman aborts, they make money off of it. And so it's not in their interest to report these things. They send these girls back to the rapist, and the rapist does it again. And it's the same thing with incest, and it's out there. You can see it. It's grisly.
How do you respond to this allegation with the larger charge that this is big business?
I think, first of all, Mr. Jones is very confused about what Planned Parenthood or other organizations like Planned Parenthood provide. They, in fact, provide comprehensive reproductive health care services. I think that, again, there are many reasons why a woman would choose to have an abortion. It may be because she has been raped. It may be because she's been incested. But these are personal, private decisions. There is not a nurse or a doctor or a healthcare provider out there who hears of a story of incest and is not reporting that incest. We have mandatory reporting laws in the state of Colorado, and they are bound by our statutes to report any type of abuse that they're aware of. And so I think that Mr. Jones talks about the No on 62 campaign using scare tactics, and in fact, I believe that he's trying to confound what it is that we do in our society regularly with issues around incest. Again, we've got over 7,000 doctors and nurses who are saying that this goes well beyond the issue of rape. It goes into not being able to treat a woman for a miscarriage, not being able to treat a woman if she has an ectopic pregnancy, women and their families not being able to have access to common forms of birth control. And because of that, we are asking the voters to please vote no on Amendment 62.
We're getting short on time. Let me start with you, Fuffy, and ask what I hope you can answer crisply. What does this debate look like 10 years from now? Let's assume this amendment goes down as it did 2 years ago. Is this just an endless political battle, or is there ever any middle ground to be had here, given where most voters are, which they would prefer to see fewer abortions, but are not comfortable with going the whole extreme?
I think that most voters already are middle ground when they look at these issues. When you look at conferring legal and constitutional rights to a woman's fertilized egg, and you recognize that that in fact is going to invite politicians, courts, and lawyers into people's personal private lives, folks realize that in fact this goes too far. 10 years from now, I would hope that this issue does not appear on the ballot again, and that this debate in fact is over, because most folks are not willing to get into the personal lives of other people and let folks be able to make their own personal private decisions about things that have far-reaching consequences on their lives.
And Gualberto, 10 years from now, are we still fighting all these fights? Are we still fighting about stem cells? Has there been any resolution to anything?
I think if we're honest with people, I think there's a famous quote from Martin Luther King which says that the arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice, and I believe that that's true. I think that eventually the American people are good, and we will see that the lies that the other side puts out there, and we will see that it's really possible to love the mother and the child. And you know, I want to give you an example.
Keep it short.
Really short. My wife is pregnant with her third child. We're hoping for a girl because we have 2 boys. This week we felt the kicking of the child for the first time. 15 weeks post-conception. My hope is that 10 years from now, that child is safe in the womb. Right now, that child couldn't be in a more dangerous place than the womb.
It's time for closing statements. A half hour goes quickly. We'll start with you, Fuffy Mendez.
The No on 62 campaign would just urge voters to please vote no. Go to our website, 62voteno.org. look at the 56 organizations that are opposing this amendment, and please recognize that Amendment 62 goes too far, impacts literally thousands of laws in the state of Colorado, and has far-reaching consequences on families and their important life decisions. So please don't hurt Colorado women and their families, and vote no on Amendment 62.
A minute, Gualberto.
I would ask the Colorado voters to not look at organizations, but to actually look at the amendment. You're smart enough to be able to read the amendment. It's very simple. And realize this, right now, there are enough children to fill the Pepsi Center being killed, being dismembered every single year. This has to change. It's not a question of medical science, it's a question of basic human rights. We're trying to amend the Bill of Rights, trying to stop the dehumanization of a large section of our population. So please vote yes on Amendment 62.
Thank you both. Spirited discussion of a difficult issue. That's all the time we have for this episode of Colorado Decides. Let me thank again our campaign representatives, Gualberto Garcia Jones and Fuffy Mendez, and as always, my fellow panelist, Terry Jessup, for joining us. If you'd like to find out more information on this race or any of the other races on the ballot, please visit our websites at cpt12.org or cbs4denver.com. And stay tuned for coverage of this race and all the big election stories on a daily basis on CBS 4. Please tune in next Friday at 9 p.m. when Colorado Decides returns with a look at the races on the November ballot. Until then, I'm your host, Eric Sondermann. Thank you for tuning in.